Hello, everybody. Welcome to One Man, One Mic, episode 3. And today I have a juicy one for you. Today I'm going to talk about something I've been waiting to discuss. I just had to gather all the necessary information and statistics before I could. But today we are going to talk about the Carson Wentz situation and the conundrum that is the Philadelphia Eagles this year and probably going beyond. So, first thing I'm going to start off with is the acknowledgement that, yes, Carson Wentz was bad this season. There's no denying it, even as the most diehard Carson Wentz fan you could be. It is hard to find reasons to defend him this season. Of course, you can say there's a lack of weapons, a lack of healthy offensive linemen, this, that, and the other. Bottom line is, you can't put up those kind of statistics and expect to have a lot of ground to stand on when it comes to trying to defend you. But putting this year aside, I'm going to talk about why he as a quarterback overall has been successful, why the Eagles should continue to go forward with him, and why this season itself, as bad as it was, could have been worse, and to be honest, should have been overlooked compared to most other seasons. But because of the year and the time we're in right now is why it was so spotlighted. So, first thing I'm going to start off with is the elephant in the room. He has no weapons to throw to. And I'm not just talking about 2020. I can talk about 2019, 2018, 17, and even to his rookie year. So, if you think, even if you're not an Eagles fan, if you think right now who is the Eagles' number one receiver is throughout his career, if you are not an Eagles fan, I would love to see your guess. Because the truth of the matter is, and I'm not talking about tight ends, Zach Ertz doesn't count, I'm talking about wide receiver. The guy who's listed on the depth chart as that position. If you're not an Eagles fan, you could probably be thinking about a lot of guys. You're probably thinking about dudes like Jeremy Maclin that haven't been on the team in 6 years. Truth of the matter is, the leading receiver in his entire career is Alshon Jeffrey. Here's some problems with that. First things first. In the 51 possible games in which Alshon Jeffrey could start, since he's been a Philadelphia Eagle, he has only played 27 of them. So that's just north of half. So basically almost half the time that he could have played, he has missed. You cannot have a number one receiver who's not available. Why do you think the Eagles have been constantly in a revolving door of mediocrity when it comes to the wide receiver position? Because the guy that they rely on the most is never available. Now, aside from his health, you can really think about a lot of factors that go into his stats in general when he actually is on the field. For his entire career as an Eagle, excluding the Super Bowl run, the 3 years since then, he has averaged only 59 yards a game. He has a total of 11 touchdowns in 3 seasons, and he averages 4 catches a game. So if you break that down into one season, it would be about a 70-catch season with 900 yards and 5 touchdowns, which is a solid season, but not for a number one wide receiver. That's the kind of statistics you expect from your slot receiver. Or, a tight end or something along those lines. But when you're expecting a guy to be your number one, your ace in the hole as far as a wide receiver goes, you expect better numbers than that. Especially in today's NFL where you have quarterbacks that over 4,000 yards, you should have at least one receiver with 1,000 yards. Which will transition me into the next statement that comes with this. The Eagles have not had a 1,000-yard wide receiver in 6 years. I mentioned the guy earlier, Jeremy Maclin. 2014, his last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, he put up a massive season of 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. And then he decided to up and leave town and go play with Andy Reid, which Chip Kelly was the head coach at the time in Philadelphia, so I don't really blame you, because it seems like just about everybody either up and left town or was shipped out of town. But that's the last time we had a 1,000-yard receiver in Philadelphia. So that's going to tell you kind of where the stats in this argument is about to go in the next 5 minutes or so. But, yeah, so keep in mind, 2014, Carson Wentz was still in North Dakota State. Wasn't even a thought to be a Philadelphia Eagle at this time. So, we've had Alshon Jeffrey. He's been our number one. By the way, he also has a 52.5 catch percentage since 2018, which ranks 10th on the team. So, even when he's in there, he's dropping the ball half the time. Which is funny because up until the playoff game against New Orleans in 2018, he was heralded as having some of the best hands in the NFL, and he wasn't ever dropping the ball. And suddenly, he's dropping the ball an awful lot. So, let's break down Carson Wentz's year, or his wide receivers, year by year in his career now. In 2016, his leading wide receiver was Jordan Matthews. He had a 78-catch season, 816 yards, and 4 touchdowns. The number 2 wide receiver that season from the Philadelphia Eagles was Dorial Green Beckham. Yeah, you might have to Google him because he hasn't been around for quite a while. He was a bust for the Tennessee Titans, and Chip Kelly and the Eagles decided they were going to take a shot on him for whatever reason. And he came to Philadelphia and had a 392-yard season and 2 touchdowns and was never heard of again. To be honest, I think that's the last destination he ever had in the NFL. 2017. You have Alshon Jeffrey. This is the year I was talking about. This is his first year. Relatively successful. To be honest, in my opinion, it's still not numbers that you would expect out of a number 1. But a 57-catch season with 789 yards and 9 touchdowns. 9 touchdowns is very solid. Number 2 receiver was Nelson Aguilar with 62 catches, 768, and 8 touchdowns. So, you catching the method here. 2 seasons down, no 1,000-yard receivers. 2018 is Alshon Jeffrey again, 65, 893, and 6 touchdowns. Nelson Aguilar again, 64, 736, and 4 touchdowns. Last year, 2019, 43, 490, and 4, Alshon Jeffrey. Keep that in mind. 490 yards was the leading wide receiver for the entire season, which is absolutely absurd. And then Nelson Aguilar was second with 39, 363, and 3. Now, Nelson Aguilar, if you really put those numbers together, in a 3-year span, had almost 2,000 yards receiving, which, honestly, for a slot receiver like he is, was actually not too bad. And the Eagles fan base, as they tend to do, just pushed him out of town and thought he was the worst thing that's ever walked in an Eagles jersey. And I think Las Vegas this year showed that he still has a lot of football left and that the Eagles are going to eat their own words when it comes to letting him go. And then this year, 2020, we have Travis Fulgham, 38 catches, 539 and 4. And then Greg Ward Jr., 53, 419 and 6. So, 5 seasons. And the best season he's had out of anybody on his team has been 893 yards. And that's, once again, not including Zach Ertz, who's the only player on the team who's had 1,000 yards in that span. So, that's the first elephant in the room. The fact that I think it's almost a known commodity now that the Eagles are horrible when it comes to the wide receiver room. I mean, it's mentioned on every TV broadcast how they literally have guys that came from McDonald's bagging to playing wide receiver for the Philadelphia Eagles. But when you see the stats and you see just how bad it's been, I think you realize a little bit more just how horrible the options have been. And to be honest, I mean, the receiving core on some of these years wasn't bad as a whole, but the fact of the matter is guys like Alshon, guys like Deshaun Jackson, these are dudes that showed up and got hurt and missed half the year, 6 games, 7 games, something like that. And a lot of times these are games that really mattered. Like, people don't really think that the early games in a season matter, but sometimes when you look later in the year, and I always say this, you can look at just about any Super Bowl team in the last 10 years, And if you look in their first 5 or 6 games, usually there's a loss there that you scratch your head at. Usually there's a team that they coughed up a loss to, and you just think, how the fuck did they lose to a 4-win, Giants team or something? But it happens. And those games are usually where you miss those guys. You miss those wide receivers or those, tight ends, those running backs. You miss those key, production players that when they miss that time and they get injured early in the year, you really start to see later in the year, oh shit, they could have been huge, especially in divisional games, which a lot of divisional games usually are scheduled at the beginning of the year as well. So if you're missing your key guys and you missing your number one guy for 3 divisional games, even if you win the other 3, you might be 3-3, and that might not be enough to cut it. So, yeah, you look at the wide receivers, not good. That's point number 1. We got a lot more here, so sit tight. Number 2, one of my favorite things to talk about, is the fact, and this also kind of goes along with this, the Eagles refuse to run the football. Now, this was a Doug Peterson thing. I took all these notes and made the stats prior to his actual firing. But let me just break down 2020 for you alone. The Eagles averaged 5.0 yards per carry. As a team, not just one guy, the whole team. That was 3rd in the NFL. Only 2 teams are better. They had 403 rush attempts as a team. That's 23rd in the NFL. So, just think about that for a second. You have a team that is 3rd best in the league, averaging 5 yards per carry. So if you do the math, you carry the ball twice, you're getting a first down. Carry the ball, carry the ball, carry the ball. First downs. That's how you build drives. That's how you get in the flow. That's how your offense gets going. Not the Eagles, though. They would rather throw the ball instead of running it. So, 5.0, 23rd in the NFL in rush attempts. And this is something that went on all year long. I think it was pointed out many times by many different analysts and many different commentators about the fact that Miles Sanders, who's heavily underused in the Eagles offense, at least was. We'll see how it is in the future. But Miles Sanders was at one point the highest yards per carry running back in the entire NFL and was failing to be utilized. He was getting the ball 11 times a game, or 9 times a game or 15 times a game. I think like week 19, I'm sorry, not week 19, week 16, he had like 19 carries. And I think that was the most he had all season long in one game. For a running back to get 19 carries in one game, especially when he averaged, I think, 5.1 yards per carry all season long, that just shows you how poor your judgment is and how poor your play calling is when somebody is obviously putting up production on the field and you are failing to either notice it or failing to capitalize on it. So, that's the first problem. And there's a couple other examples here. For example, they were tied for 3rd in 2017, 4.8 yards per carry, and they only carried it 470 times, which I think was ranked 16th in the NFL. So it was a recurring theme in Doug Peterson's offense to have a successful running game and fail to utilize it. Now we go into the passing here, and this is kind of one of the things that goes against Carson Wentz. Not as him personally. These are one of the things that are pushing against him and his, in my opinion, his ceiling. 2016, as a rookie quarterback in the NFL, he throws the ball 607 times. NFL record. Still to this day is the NFL record. Most attempts by a rookie. It was the 5th most that season. Move on to 2017. He had 440 before he got hurt. So 440, which ranked 23rd overall in the NFL at the end of the day. However, theoretically, had he played all 16 at the pace that he was at, he would have thrown 541, which would have ranked 7th. 7th most attempts in the NFL. You go to 2018. 2018, he had 401, once again, before the injury and the 2 weeks he missed at the beginning of the season. So you count out the 5 games he missed that year. 401. He was on pace for 583, which would have also ranked 7th. 2019, he had 607 again, matching his rookie year, ranked 5th. And then 2020, had he not been benched, he was on pace for what would have been a career high 613 pass attempts, which would have ranked 2nd this season. So, do the math, 5 seasons as a starter, and not once was he on pace for anything worse than 7th most attempts in the league. The Eagles are not doing this guy any favors. At least Doug Peterson's offense and the way he was calling it was not doing Carson Wentz any favors. Because it is a pass offense. That's what it is. Throw the ball, throw it. The problem is the Eagles don't have an offense, and they don't have a scheme and personnel that fits that style. They did in 2017, which is why it worked. Because you had a good mix of everything. You had your big body red zone guy like Alshon Jeffrey. You had your speedy guy, your burner like Torrey Smith, who would spread the field and open it up, make lanes. You had your running backs, which they had a running back by committee. They were one of the first teams, in my opinion, in the last 4 or 5 years that really drove home that running back by committee and utilized it the best, because they had Corey Clement, LeGarrette Blount, Jay Ajayi, and I think they were alternating Darren Sproles in that mix as well. So they had 4 running backs that year that they were moving in and out, and it really worked well. They had the number 3, I mentioned that earlier. They had number 3 yards per carry for the team that season. But they had a good mix of offense that year, which is why it worked. The problem is when 2018 rolled around, they went right back to what they did in 2016, which was just throwing the ball mindlessly. They lost some weapons they needed, like Torrey Smith, which, honestly, in my opinion, is the one thing the Eagles have been missing forever, basically since Deshaun Jackson left his first time. They don't have a guy that can spread the field like that. They don't have somebody with that kind of speed, somebody with that kind of quickness. And they keep drafting guys and bringing guys in that they think are going to be that guy, and the same thing happens every time. They get hurt, which is it's a common trope when it comes to these fast guys, is that they usually are very fragile. Look at John Ross. Look at Deshaun Jackson. I don't think Deshaun Jackson's ever played a 16-game season. I could be wrong, but if he has, he hasn't done it more than once, I don't think. But, John Ross, Deshaun Jackson, Mike Wallace, Marquise Goodwin. I can just name these guys just in recent memory that are known for their speed and quickness. Ted Ginn, known for their speed and quickness, but they can't stay on the field. And 3 of those guys, Marquise Goodwin, Mike Wallace, and Deshaun Jackson, have all been Eagles. And none of them have helped the Eagles, at least not Jackson on his second stint. I mean, hell, last year, Jackson, first game against the Redskins, blew up and had 2 touchdowns and 170 yards, I think, and didn't play for the rest of the damn season. But, yeah, I think that is one of the huge things that the Eagles are missing. But anyway, back to my point here. Wentz has been told and been forced to just throw the ball, and he hasn't had the luxury of having an offense where he doesn't have to constantly run the offense. He doesn't have to constantly be the focal point. He doesn't have to constantly have the team on his shoulders. You have guys like Dak Prescott, who in his rookie year didn't have to throw the ball nearly as much as Carson Wentz. If I'm not mistaken, I think Prescott had like 440 attempts as a rookie. I could be wrong, but either way, I know it wasn't close to 607. Because he had a running back that ran for almost 1,700 yards as a rookie in Zeke. Wentz hasn't had that luxury. From the very beginning, he was thrown to the wolves and said, you are going to be the guy. You're going to be the guy that's going to throw us into a Super Bowl. And he did. People would want to discredit that season all they want, but that dude played 13 games, won 11 of them, and got them on the right path to Super Bowl. It's just like in the NBA, if LeBron James plays, what is that, like 60% of games, 70% of the games? So if LeBron James plays, 68 games out of the season, you're not going to not give him a ring just because he misses the playoffs. Same thing with Wentz here. Wentz did what they had to do. Anybody that's watched Nick Foles over history, you should already know, Nick Foles is not a good regular season quarterback. He's a Mariano Rivera, and that's about all he's got. He's not going to get you to the dance, but once he gets in there, he's got the moves like Jagger. But, Wentz from the very beginning has had this pressure to where he's hasn't had a running game that he can rely on, or when he does have one he can rely on, the coach is not using that running game to his benefit. Which I'm hoping with this new coach, whose name I cannot pronounce at this moment, but I'm hoping this new coach will see that because of what the Colts did this year with Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, hoping that he sees the success they've had and wants to kind of utilize the same type of offense in Philadelphia and put Miles Sanders to good use. I want to see Miles Sanders break 1,000 yards next year and 13 touchdowns. That's the kind of shit that I want to see, because I think if you have a running back that's going to get 230, 250 carries in a season, that would so greatly help this offense. It would be so great for Wentz in his mindset to know that, hey, I don't have to go out and throw the ball 38 times, which, by the way, that was his average this season. 38 attempts this season was how many he was throwing every game. Yeah, you wonder why he threw a pick every game, because when you're throwing the ball 38 times, for some guys, that's 2 games right there. Lamar Jackson, what's he throw it 18 times a game? Like, when you're throwing 38 times and you, as we already mentioned here, have nobody to throw to, you're bound to have some problems. This equation doesn't add up. This formula is going to explode in your face, which it inevitably did. So, with the way that he's been forced to take on this offense from the very beginning, out Jump Street as his rookie, he hasn't had a break. He hasn't had that luxury, like I mentioned. And I'm thinking and hoping that moving on, we will see a better addition and a better overall offense scheme that will help the passing game more. But a lot of that will go into the draft and how they draft accordingly. Because, as I mentioned, with these horrible weapons, they kind of need a guy. Well, that's another problem with the Eagles. So, not a Wentz thing, I'm not going to get too much into this, but another thing that has not helped him is the fact that the Eagles can't draft for shit. They might be the worst drafting team out there when it comes to key offensive weapons. There are other positions they draft solid at, but when it comes to drafting guys that are going to make an impact on offense, wide receivers in general, basically, they might be the worst team. So, I'm just going to point out 2020, because it's the obvious elephant in the room, because it's fresh in our minds. They draft Jalen Reagor, who I'm not going to go too hard on Jalen Reagor. Yes, he got hurt, which, hell, if you're going to be an Eagle, you might as well follow the book and get hurt too. But, yes, he got hurt, but we don't have enough sample size for me to say that this guy is good or bad. But it doesn't look good for him because he had Justin Jefferson and Chase Claypool in the same exact draft class, and both of those two had, I think, in my opinion, they both should be Pro Bowlers, but they both had a fantastic seasons as rookies. Justin Jefferson was breaking Randy Moss records, and he definitely turned some heads, and that's going to be bad for Reagor because of the fact that he's the guy drafted right behind you. It's just like when quarterbacks get drafted 1 and 2, you are always going to be compared to the guy that's drafted right behind you if you're number 1. Because if you don't perform better than him, it's always going to be that, well, they probably should have chose him then. And not a good look for Reagor, but as I said, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt just because of the fact that he did get hurt. So hopefully next year we'll see him kind of stretch his legs more, literally and figuratively, and then I can give more of a honest and accurate opinion on him. But for now, we'll go from here. We'll gauge it how we have to. But Jalen Reagor is one example, and that's just a wide receiver for this season. They also had Cesar Ruiz, who was drafted by the Saints, I think 2 picks after them, and that's another position that the Eagles could need help at, because Jason Kelce is literally about to retire, and the Eagles are going to be without a center, which is the only offensive line position that they've had consistent play at, consistent health at, and now they're about to lose that, either if it's not this year, next year, but the rumors are pointing at this year. And that's another position that they really could have drafted and helped. But they failed to do that, and they went for wide receiver, which, hey, I'm not upset about. You're kind of, taking the bull by the horns there, but this is one where you're going to look at the long game, and hindsight's going to look at it and probably say that drafting Ruiz would have probably been a good move as well. But if we go back to last year with Andre Dillard, that's who they drafted. 3 picks later was Hollywood Brown. That's a wide receiver who's obviously proven himself. He's obviously done great things with the Ravens. And, I mean, these are all hindsight things, obviously, but it just goes to show that when you have hindsight for 1 year and you go, oh, they messed up that draft, you can say, okay, well, give them a break. But you can go back and look at the Eagles drafts for the last 5 or 10 years, especially the last 5 years, and say, okay, you guys consistently fuck up on every round and every draft, especially the first 2 rounds, and there's no accountability held for it. Here's a quick stat for you right now. Since 2016, the year that Carson Wentz was drafted, do you know how many Pro Bowlers the Eagles have drafted? They've drafted 1. And would you guess that his name is Carson Wentz? That's it. He's the only one. Only Pro Bowler for the Eagles drafted since 2016. I mean, that right there is another stat in itself that would make you go, okay, there's obviously a fucking problem here. But that's something that I'm not going to go too much into right now because it doesn't really pertain to Wentz himself, and I'm kind of trying to focus more on him himself, what he's done, and why he should continue to be the Eagles quarterback. So let's get back into that more or less. So one of the things I really want to attack here is one of the things that I've heard, I think, literally every ESPN, Fox, CBS, you name it, NFL Network. I feel like I've heard every analyst, every broadcaster say this statement, and I want to show that it doesn't hold water, and that it's one of the most ridiculous statements I've ever heard. Just about everybody has said Carson Wentz has not been the same quarterback since the injury. Not referring to the 2018 back injury, the injury in 2017, the knee injury. Everybody says that MVP caliber season was his peak, and he has not been the same since. There are people that have even gone to the lengths to say that he's been garbage since. So I'm here to completely debunk that theory, and show you why you are absolutely ignorant for saying it. 2018, the very next year. So he misses the first 2 games because he was still dealing with his knee injury, but he got injured week 14 of the previous year, so it's understandable. But he misses the first 2 games, comes in week 3 against the Colts and leads them to a comeback win. That season, the Eagles were quiet. They made the playoffs at 9-7, I think. But, it was another year with a bad division, and it was a quiet year. But the thing people don't realize is Carson Wentz actually had a higher passer rating that season than he did in his MVP caliber season the year before. He had a 101.9 in 2017 and a 102.2 in 2018. So if you actually break down the stats, he would have had a better season had he played all 16 games the next year than he did the previous year. So, right there, passer rating is better. Touchdown interception ratio was, I think it was a little better in 2017. It was about 4.4 in 2017, and it was a flat 3 in 2018. But the yards per game were significantly better. He threw about 239 yards per game in 2017. It was about 280 in 2018. So he was moving the ball a lot more with the offense the following year, which is why the passer rating was different. And then 2019, last year, once again, NFC East, very bad division. Eagles win it with a 9-7 record again. He had 93.1, which significant drop from the previous 2 years, but still a 93.1 is a solid season overall. So if you take those 3 seasons together, 2017, 18, and 19, He had a 99 quarterback rating. That is his average among all 3 of those years, 99.0. To put that into perspective for you, that was the 9th. If you compare everybody in the NFL, at least with at least 16 games started, for that span of time, that is the 9th highest passer rating in that 3-year span of any quarterback. To name some notable names, that is a higher passer rating in that span than Rodgers, Brady, Prescott, Stafford, and Roethlisberger. All those guys, including Brady, who won an MVP in that time span in 2017. So he had a higher passer rating than all those guys over that 3-year span. And I named that 3-year span because I'm not including this year. I'm talking about the years prior. And I'll get into why this year is not as important in a few minutes. But, so, 9th highest in that 3-year span. His interception percentage, which this is important, especially because a lot of people want to bring up his interceptions as an issue that he's had. But his interception percentage was the 7th best in the NFL in that span as well. So 3 years, he had the 7th best, and it was also better than Brady. It was also better than, I want to say Breeze. I don't have the list in front of me, but there were a few other notable names in there that he had a better interception percentage than, that would probably make you raise your eyebrows. He had a better one than, no, he didn't have a better one than Rodgers. Nobody has a better one than Rodgers. And the other thing in that time span that I think is very notable to think about, he had the 8th most wins of any quarterback in that 3-year span. And that is even more significant because of the fact that in that 3-year span he missed 8 games. And the 5 that he missed in 2018 and the 3 that he missed in 2017. So he missed 8 games in that span and still had the 8th most amount of wins. Just think that his winning percentage, if you break it down, he probably would have been more at like 29, 30. So he would have been more around the line. He had 25 wins in that 3-year span, so he would have been more around 29, 30. So he probably would have evened out about 5th. So those are 4 very important stats. Passer rating, interception percentage, wins, and so those are 3, not 4. But those are 3 important stats that I think get overlooked. And I think you look at those stats right there and you cannot tell me that he has not been good the last 2 years. You can't tell me that 2017 was, a great white buffalo as far as years go and that he's been garbage ever since. Because it's just not true. As I said at the very opening of this video, you can say that he was bad this year. I'll agree with you on every count. But you can't tell me that he wasn't good last year when he put the team on his back and won the last 4 games of the year and led them into the playoffs. You can't tell me he wasn't good in 2018. And the funny thing about 2018, I'll mention real quick, he had only 7 picks in 2018, and 4 of them came against the Saints. So when you really boil that down, all the other games, he had 3 interceptions. So that is something else right there to look at, and the fact that he hasn't had an interception problem coming into this year either. That's another thing that's been fabricated and is a product of just the season. And that's something that, kind of segued into the next thing I'm going to talk about, but I mentioned this, I think I briefly mentioned this talking about Tua in my first video, but we live in a sports society, NFL society, but sports society in general, that you are unable to have a bad year. It's not possible anymore. It's not acceptable. And especially if you are at a key marquee position like quarterback. And it's sad because these guys are the ones that you're drafting or trading for or signing in free agency to be the face of your franchise. However, you are so quick to get rid of the face of your franchise at the slightest bit of struggle. Because as I stated, the 3 years Wentz had coming into this year are good. This year, not good. And I mean, you can ignore the city of Philadelphia because Eagles fans are absolutely insane, and they don't know what they want when it comes to anything at any position on the team. So ignoring Eagles fans in general and going just to outside media, you have people from every outlet that were calling for Wentz's job this year. And the fact of the matter is, this dude had one bad year. I mean, you can, if you want to say you go back to his rookie year and say it was a bad year too, then sure, go ahead. But it's a rookie year. I mean, you have to call it what it is. Call a spade a spade. Not many people have Dak Prescott rookie years. You know, rookie years are supposed to be very average, supposed to be bad. Hell, Josh Allen had a 65 passer rating in his rookie year. And look at him now. AFC Championship game next weekend. But, you know, rookie years are supposed to be bad, so I don't really hold that to him. However, the next 3 years are good. This, in my opinion, would be what I would call his first bad year. But as I said, we live in an NFL where you can't have a bad year anymore. Otherwise, your entire job, your livelihood, everything is in jeopardy. You are no longer considered a good quarterback. You're no longer considered a good player, no matter what position you're playing. And that goes back to the passer rating diagram that I recently mentioned, I think in the Tua video as well. The way that quarterbacks are throwing now, and the rules that benefit quarterbacks, and the way that defenses can't protect the way they used to, and all these factors that go into it, and the way the game, favors offenses and quarterbacks and everything in general. All of this going into one, passer ratings are through the roof. They just are. And it's gotten to the point now where we are so spoiled as sports fans and as NFL fans. If your quarterback doesn't have a 100 passer rating, he's not good. That's a lot of the way that's the way it comes out a lot. If he's not throwing a 100 passer rating, then he's average. He's not top 5. He's not top 10. And it's honestly obnoxious to think about, because even just 5 years ago, we were in such a different place passer rating wise than we are now. Quarterbacks and the passing game in general are so efficient now, to where you go back and look at 2005, you had guys that were still 2-to-1 pass interception ratio was still good. If you were throwing 25 touchdowns and 12 picks, you were having a good year. You were making the fucking Pro Bowl. But now, if you aren't throwing a 3-to-1 or better, then you're trash, or you're average, or you better have a goddamn good running game and defense, because turnovers are such a, I think they're put under the microscope so much more now, as to where you can go back in the days of the 90s and 2000s, there were dudes throwing 25 picks a year and still making Pro Bowls. And it's absurd to think about, and people are probably going to question me on it and think that that's not true either, but I've got examples right here in front of me that I can tell you that they are. Hell, Brett Favre alone, who I've compared Wentz to Brett Favre many times, and people don't want to hear that because Brett Favre is a golden boy and he's a legend and all this other shit, but Carson Wentz, for example, had a 72.9 passer rating this year. Brett Favre had 4 seasons in his 20-year career that were worse than that. In 1993, 05, 06, and 2010. In 1993, he had 19 touchdowns and 24 picks. So 5 more picks than touchdowns, and the dude made the fucking Pro Bowl that year. Just put that into perspective. Carson Wentz didn't even have more picks than he did touchdowns this year. At any point, I don't believe. And yet, we're talking about him losing his job and how he's not good anymore, and how the Eagles need to move on and start fresh. 1993 is Brett Favre's first year as a Green Bay Packer. First year. No, it might be 1992. Somebody will correct me on that. I know he was a Falcon for 1 year. But anyway, 1993 is, if it's not his first year, it's his second year as a Packer. And this dude is, no, it is, 92 was his first year, 91 was the year he was drafted. Don't mind me, I'm just correcting myself here. Anyway, so 93 is his third year in total, second year as a Packer. Imagine if Green Bay gave up on this dude like the Eagles are, or the Eagles fan base and media is on Wentz right now. then you don't have Brett Favre for the next 17 years. Or 15 if you're in the case of Green Bay. You don't have a Super Bowl 3 years later. And, and I've even shared things on social media about how their stats at this point in their career are so staggeringly similar. I mean, passer rating, rushing yards, fumbles lost, interceptions, touchdowns, all these things are so, the differences in percentages and yards and everything is so minimal, you would think that they're the same fucking player if I didn't show you the name. But people want to dismiss that because, Favre got an MVP. Yeah, do you know what? Brett Favre got an MVP and he still threw over 20 interceptions that season. Over 20 picks the year he got the MVP. So, really, when you boil it down, would he deserve that MVP in today's NFL? No, he wouldn't. That's the problem. Wentz plays in an era that doesn't fit a bad season. So, even though he's been efficient, even though, as I said, he had the 7th best interception percentage for the 3 years prior to this year, even though he's been efficient, he has a bad year this year, and they're not going to care that this dude has been good. They don't care that he, still threw touchdowns, that he was still on pace to throw 20 touchdowns this season, probably on pace for about 4,000 yards again. He was still on pace to do these things. They don't care about that because he threw a lot of interceptions. But in the 90s and 2000s, when Brett Favre was doing it, throw the dude Pro Bowls and MVPs because, woo, he's a gunslinger and we love that style of play. But it doesn't fly today. If you're a gunslinger style of play nowadays, you're reckless with the football. You are, childish. You're immature. You need to learn better. You need to have more, what's the word I'm looking for? More discipline. You need to have more discipline with the football. Like, these are the things that get said about quarterbacks like Brett Favre now. Brett Favre's an all-time legend. I'm not knocking anything on Brett Favre. I support Wentz, and I use Brett Favre as a good comparison to Wentz. However, my point still stands. Favre had a lot of bad years, and I'm not talking about early in his career either. 2005, that's the 14th year for this dude. He's 37 at this point, I think. Or 36. So, he's well into his career at this point and still having very bad seasons. 23 picks and 17 touchdowns or some shit like that he had. Or he had 29 touchdowns one year. Or 29 interceptions one year. I think that might have been 2005. And he's still, getting re-signed. He's still the franchise quarterback where they're still dedicated to him because that's Green Bay, because that's that fan base, because that was that time. Now we're in a time where you can't do that. Now we're in a time where if Wentz would have thrown 29 interceptions this season, there would not even be a question on whether or not he was coming back next year. Not even a question. They would move on. He would already be gone. The Eagles would have already found a way to move him before the season's even over. Or either that, or they would have already came out publicly and said, we're getting rid of him. Because 29 interceptions would be absolutely unfathomable in this time. You saw last year with Jameis Winston, 30 picks, and there were people that were clamoring and praying that that dude would stay in Tampa. I know Tampa fans that were defending him to the end of time. Didn't matter. At the end of the day, he still got booted, and they brought in Tom Brady. Now, would Winston have stayed had Brady not came to town? That's up for debate. But either way, I don't think that, even if he did stay, I don't think it would have been on good terms. It would have been like a 1 year, like, dude, you need to throw like 20 less interceptions or we're going to get rid of your ass type of situation. But, as I said, it's a time where you can't have a bad year. And unfortunately, Wentz had one this year. Unfortunately, this year was the worst time for him to have a bad year. But the thing for the Eagles is that they really fucked themselves on is you just signed this dude. Like, this is not a Dak Prescott situation where the Cowboys have stretched his contract out, which, by the way, they fucked themselves in that situation too, but because they have no leverage. But, you already committed. You already saw this guy, which, by the way, for the people that, want to say he hasn't had any good seasons, there's a reason that they fucking re-signed him when they did, because he had 2 great seasons in 2017 and 2018, and the Eagles said, we might want to fucking grab that guy for a long time. They didn't go, oh yeah, well, even though he was horrible in 2018, we're going to re-sign him to the largest contract in NFL history at the time anyways. No, they saw that he was still solid. They saw that in a 2-year span he had 54 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, which is a 4-to-1 ratio. Like, they saw that he was still efficient, he was still a leader, and that he was still great with the team. And great for the team in the future. But then this year happened. And this is the situation. You're stuck with him. Like, you can do everything you want, you can make up whatever scenarios you want. The fact of the matter is the Eagles are fucked with Carson Wentz, which is why they moved Doug Peterson out of town, because you have to choose the lesser of 2 evils. Doug Peterson, I never liked him as a head coach, except for the year we won the Super Bowl, because, hey man, you got me a Super Bowl. Thank you. I really appreciate it. But aside from that, I mean, as an offensive-minded coach, as an offensive coordinator that came from Andy Reid's system, the dude was very, very, very average as an offensive coach. Very average offensive play caller. The offense was so predictable, and defense is just, you could tell just watching the game too, they didn't even have to try. It was so easy for them to just figure out what the Eagles were doing and shut it down, which is another thing that did not go in Carson Wentz's benefit. It did not help that he constantly had to worry about that. That when these game plans came out, and he already knew, he probably knew at the time of the snap, or as soon as the play was called, like, oh shit, that's not going to work. Like, kind of like when Aaron Rodgers joked earlier this year and said, oh, sometimes when I get a play call I don't like, I just, call an audible or pretend that my mic wasn't, working or whatever. I swear that's probably what happened in Philly sometimes. I swear there were sometimes Wentz was getting that call and going, really, dude? Like, really? Why the fuck are we calling that play? Especially on all those ridiculous 4th and 1 and 4th and 3 calls when they're at their own 35-yard line going for it, because Doug Peterson wants to prove that he's fearless and he isn't afraid of anything and I'll go for it whenever and nobody can tell me what to do. Well, when you're 31st in the league in 4th down conversion percentage and, I think 29th in the league in 3rd down, it really comes back to bite you in the ass. So yeah, ultimately the Eagles decided to choose the lesser of 2 evils, because if they decided to keep Doug Peterson, you had to do something with Carson Wentz. And if you offload that contract, no matter what you get in return, even if you got 2 first-round picks in return, which would never happen, but even if you manage to get that in return, you still have to deal with the fact that you have dead cap for Carson Wentz. So they were screwed with that contract anyway. So they knew that as ownership and management, they knew that they had to get rid of Peterson and keep the quarterback, because that's who they committed to. They didn't commit to that head coach. And it was very clear that the head coach did not commit to the quarterback. So that relationship, it was an ugly breakup where they were still living in the same house and somebody had to be kicked out. That's just what it was. And ultimately, it ended up being the head coach. And so, now that this bad season is over, and now that looking forward with a new head coach and hopefully a brand new offensive scheme and a brand new play calling style and all this other stuff, we can only hope that going forward, I mean, as an Eagles fan, if there's Cowboys, Giants, and football team fans listening, you're probably not hoping for it, but as just a fan in general of football, I like to see young players succeed. I mean, most of them. There's a couple guys that can get fucked, but I like to see most players succeed, and especially the guys that are on my team. And as a firm believer in Carson Wentz from the very beginning, I want to see him succeed. This is a guy that I supported before he was even an Eagle. When I was doing mock drafts back in 2016, I had him going to Cleveland number 2 overall, and it might have been number 1. I don't remember who had. Somebody traded out of number 1 that year. It might have been Cleveland, but I had him going there because I thought he was the best quarterback in that draft. And when he went to Philadelphia, I was ecstatic myself because we just got off a year with Sam Bradford, and I knew that this shit was not going to fly very long. And, when we got him in, I wanted nothing but success for him, obviously. And,
for the first 4 years it was. And, it's hard as a fan to look at the situation from the way that I see it, because I don't look at the Eagles from the eyes of a fan. I don't look at it through that lens. I look at it as an overall analyst of the league, which is why I'm able to look at Eagles games and look at the way that this team operated this year and know that this isn't on number 11. Some games, yes. Some plays, yes. Does he have things to work on? Absolutely, there's no question. He's by far and away not close to a top 5 quarterback. He's got a lot of work to do, at least based on what he did this year. Can he get back to that? Absolutely. Hell, this is a guy that even in 2019, just a year ago, literally about a year ago this time, this is a guy that was working with not a single 500-yard receiver, as I mentioned earlier, and he led a team full of nobodies into the playoffs on a 4-game streak at the end of the year to, win a division. So even if they have the same weapons next year, if they have a competent offense and they have a head coach and hopefully an offensive coordinator that can call games correctly and put him and the offense in a position to succeed, I am very, very excited to see where it goes. But as far as he goes in general, the people that are, if you're a Wentz hater, you're always going to be a Wentz hater. Guys like Skip Bayless, who said he's never believed in him from the very beginning and shit like that. There's not going to be any changing your minds. You're going to find everything you can and every argument that you can to say, yep, that's on him. Every bad pass is on him. It's not on the receiver. It's not on the offensive line. Every drop is on him. He should have threw it higher. Should have threw it lower. Everything. You're going to find every excuse and everything you can to fit your narrative that he is bad or he's not good. Just like if you are a super, super Wentz supporter, you're going to find every narrative that it's not his fault. Which I've seen both. I've been both. I can't say I've been a Wentz hater, but I've definitely been on the side of okay, this dude needs to fucking chill out. But you can find narratives to fit. You can find arguments to fit both your narratives. Regardless, the play on the field is what I look at, and overall in his career, it's still been solid. Right now, no joke whatsoever. Right now, he has the 23rd highest passer rating for a career in NFL history. As of this moment, right now, he's an 89.8, which is ranked 23rd overall in NFL history. At this moment, if he retired right now, he's 23rd, which is remarkable. But, nobody wants to talk about that because they just want to talk about this year and how absolutely horrible it was. Which, take into account, if he didn't even have this year, if this year was marginally better, if he had an 82 passer rating instead of a 72, we're talking about a 94 for his career, and he's probably sitting at 17th or 16th or 15th, somewhere around that area in passer rating for a career, which is, it's remarkable. But as I said, one bad year will change everything, and unfortunately he just had one. But hopefully next year things will change, and we'll see an entirely different, entirely different Wentz next year. If not, then the Eagles can make that decision next year and move on. But, that's the kind of decision that they have to make, and I can't wait to see what they do. One of the things that I found very interesting this year was the, in my opinion, kind of ridiculous outpouring of support and overwhelming I'm trying to see what to say. Support and overwhelming praise for Jalen Hurts. And because, once again, I'm a stats guy, I'm a guy that I don't care how flashy you are on the field. I don't care how great your teammates get along with you. I don't care about anything like that. I look at how successful are you being on the field? Are we winning games? And are you, if you're replacing somebody, are you significantly better than the person you're replacing? Those are the things I look at. So let's go through these three things real quick. First, is he playing good? Is he, being a game changer? Being what am I thinking of here? Either way, are you playing at this remarkable level? Are you changing things? Jalen Hurts didn't. Okay, overall he did not. I know that there's this narrative that he was a spark in that he changed the Eagles and the offense played so much better under Jalen Hurts, but it really didn't. Because if you know football and you know what you're talking about at least a little bit, Jalen Hurts didn't come in and spark the offense. He didn't come in and completely change and uplift everybody. No. Jalen Hurts came in and had the lovely advantage of not having film. So when Green Bay saw him stroll out onto the field, and he had been in the game for a total of 33 plays at that point throughout the year in various different packages, when they saw him stroll out there in the third quarter, fourth quarter, whatever it was, but when the Packers saw Jalen Hurts stroll out, they didn't have any game film on this guy. They didn't know what he could do. So when he starts running for first downs and getting 13 yards for a first down on the ground, they're not used to seeing that with number 11. And when he's rolling out of the pocket and running read options and RPOs, that's not things that the Eagles were running with Wentz. That's a completely different offense. Advantage, Eagles. Advantage, Hurts. Same thing goes the next year. Or not the next year. Same thing goes the next week. You go to New Orleans. Big game against the big scary Saints. The Saints didn't have film on Jalen Hurts. They had one quarter against the Packers, I think, a quarter and a half, and then they had the 30 plays that he played variously throughout the year. So they had maybe a total of 55 plays on him. And what did he do? He ran like a madman all over the Saints defense. Because for whatever reason, they just assumed that this guy couldn't run. They looked to him and said, this is a quarterback, he can only throw the ball, that's how we're going to treat this. And he did not do that. He just ran like his ass was on fire. And it worked. They beat the Saints. Now, granted, was it a huge win? No, that would mean the game was closer than it appeared in a lot of different fashions. And there were many opportunities they had to lose that game. But they didn't. They ended up winning. So, hey, hurrah, the big upset, and suddenly he's a hero. He had, a couple good drives against the Packers and beat the Saints, and now, clearly, Wentz is going out of town. So, the next thing I'm going to look at is, did we win games with Jalen Hurts? The answer is no. We won that aforementioned Saints game in a very close one. Aside from that, the other 3 games that this guy started, we lost. And 2 of them didn't even look good. The Cardinals was a close loss. I think we lost by 3, maybe even less than that. But the other 2 games against divisional opponents in very important environments, Dallas and Washington, it was ugly, and Hurts was one of the main reasons that it was ugly. He did not play well against Dallas whatsoever. We got beat by 27, I think, which, by the way, just 5 weeks earlier, Wentz beat the Cowboys, even though it was ugly, found a way to do it. Hurts couldn't do that. And then against Washington in the most controversial game of the year, when he got benched, Hurts played absolutely horrible. Which is why I honestly didn't care that he got benched. Because if you're going to if you're a head coach and you're going to make the decision to put a guy in, and you're going to try to show him, hey, this is the NFL world, welcome to it. Obviously, Doug Peterson had this mindset that anybody can get it, kind of. Like, if you ain't playing good, you're not going to be playing. He benched Wentz. Wentz is gone. Benched Hurts when Hurts wasn't playing well. Put another guy in. People defend Hurts. I hear a lot of people say, "Oh, Hurts would have won that game if they kept him in there." What evidence do you possibly have to say that he would have done that? At that point in the game, he had a 25.4 passer rating. I don't know how you possibly look at the stats he had that day and tell me that he would have just suddenly turned it on in the moment. This is a guy that's never done well in the moment. Like, really, his last game in college against LSU, he got absolutely throttled by the Tigers. Threw, I think, 3 interceptions. Why do you think the dude went in the second round and not the first? Because he's not good in big moments. He held the biggest moment of his career against Georgia in the national championship game. He got benched and 2-0 came in, and that was the end of his Alabama career, basically. But, the bottom line is he was 1-3 in 4 games. 1 in 4 if you want to count him trying to close out that Packers game, but I'm not going to count that against him. But he's 1-3 in the games he started, so he won 25% of games. Well, Carson Wentz won 3 games. 3 games in the 11 that he played. So, 11 and a half. So we'll say 3 games in 11 and a half. So you do the math on that, and that's just over 25%. So was he an improvement on the winning percentage? No. And to be honest, there wasn't much you could see out of Jalen Hurts that would say, hey, he would have been. But, of course, the one win against the Saints is going to make people contemplate and speculate that he would have, if they'd only done it earlier, we would have won 9 games. If you want to believe that, sure, but I saw a quarterback that he's young. So as I mentioned earlier, rookie seasons, you got to take them for what they are. But I saw a quarterback that got progressively worse in each game that he played in. He went from playing at the peak of what he is against the Saints, very Lamar Jackson style player, not a lot of passing yards, a lot of rushing yards, very dynamic and explosive, to not running the ball much against Arizona, but throwing it a lot. And then, as I said, those last 2 games against divisional opponents, it was like a completely different guy. He went out there and played horribly in both games. Didn't do the Eagles any favors in either game. And, it came back to bite him in the ass. If Hurts had came out and went 3-1 at the end of the year, make the playoffs or not, if he came out and went 3-1 and had a 99 passer rating, then you could have every right to sit here and say that he is the guy moving forward, and he did far and away better than Wentz did. But at the end of the day, when you boil it down, he had a 77.4 passer rating, I think, for the season. 77.4. So if you go back to elementary school math here and do your rounding, 77.4 rounds down to a 77. 72.9 for Wentz rounds up to a 73. So that's a 4 passer rating difference. 4. So, once again, you wonder why they got rid of Doug Peterson instead of Carson Wentz? Because are you really going to offload an $128 million contract over 4% in passer rating, or 4 points? Like, is that really what we're doing here? Once again, if Hurts had stayed as he did those first few games, where he was up over 100 passer rating, had he played that way all 4 games, you could have a strong argument for the guy. But at the end of the day, those last 2 games really hurt him, and his passer rating was very mediocre as well. And, going into the third topic about is he an improvement over Wentz, well, one of the main things, probably the main trope that has been against Carson Wentz throughout his NFL career has been the fact that he fumbles the football. He's got, a very loose grip on it. Not literally, but, he coughs it up a lot. Jalen Hurts fumbled the ball 9 times this year. In 4 games. 9 times in 4 games. if you do the math, he was on pace to fumble the ball 36 times this season. 36. Now, I don't know the NFL record off the top of my head, but I have a feeling that's probably it. 36 fumbles. He had 9 this year. I think he lost 4. So he would have lost 16 this year if you do the math. So 36 fumbles. He also threw 6 interceptions, 5 interceptions. So in 4 games, he had 9 fumbles and let's call it 5 interceptions. So 14. 14, what I call ball in harm's way plays. Which, is no improvement over Carson Wentz. You want to talk about, how bad he played this year and how careless he was with the football. Truth of the matter is, the guy that these Hurts supporters are, trying to replace him with, he's not impressing me. And as I said, I look at it from more than just the lens of an Eagles fan's eyes. I look at it from a sports perspective in general. If the guy behind you is not showing that he is far and away better, then why are you going to move him in there? You have to look at it's like a car, for example. If you have a nice, reliable car that you've invested a lot of money into, and this it's a Toyota, so it's going to run for 77 years. But you've got a Toyota that you've invested a lot of money into, and this thing is reliable and it's not going to break down on you. And even if it does break down, that it's gonna it's an easy fix. It's not going to be too bad. Or you got this nice, shiny, new, fucking, some expensive car, Lamborghini. You have this nice, shiny Lamborghini that's really fast and, makes people's eyes move and, catches some people's eyes. Are you going to get rid of your car and, all the money and time you invested in it and move on from it for the new, shiny guy when you don't know how reliable this one is? You don't know how long it's going to be. You don't know if you're going to be driving that thing for a year or 6 months or 10 years. And that might be a completely ridiculous analogy there, but point of the matter is, as I've stated here on multiple different fronts, this is a guy that overall throughout his career has proven that he can be reliable. And for people to want to move on from him for a guy that has shown 4 games in which 2 of them he looked promising, I don't get it. I don't know how you can possibly want to move forward, and that's why these people don't deserve to be GMs or fucking anything, because obviously you couldn't run a team. Your Madden NFL team probably looks like fucking garbage. You probably have absolutely no rhythm and no flow to your team, and you no draft picks for the next 16 years because you fucking traded them all away for 37-year-old linemen. But who am I to say? But the last thing I'll talk about before I have to get done with this topic here. Wentz, as a supporter of him, I've heard people say the things. I think Pat McAfee said that Tyrod Taylor's had the most unfortunate career in his time, and he said unfortunate events happen and whatnot. Wentz has been through hell and back with Philadelphia, which it's not easy because Philadelphia's a fucking city that will tear you to shreds and then piece you back together and buy you dinner the next day. It's just what they do. And hell, you have the people to this day still that say we shouldn't have got rid of Nick Foles. Do you not remember the first game after Super Bowl 52? The next season, Thursday Night Football, were the first game of the year against the Falcons. Going into halftime, Nick Foles is being booed going into halftime into the locker room. Because that's how quickly the Eagles fans will turn on you. He doesn't take much. He doesn't. And Wentz has been through a blender when it comes to this team and this organization in his career. 2016, he gets drafted, and there's praise. People are loving it. You know, we got a quarterback. We're not going to deal with fucking the Michael Vicks and fucking Sam Bradfords and Vince Youngs and whoever the hell else we went through in that time time span. You know, we're not going to deal with all this mixed bag of quarterbacks. We had fucking Mark Sanchez for a minute there. You know, we're finally going to find our guy. We traded up and, you know, a lot of picks for the next couple of years. We went out and got him. And in 2016, the city was still behind him. You know, the hashtag for Wentzylvania came out, and he had the city behind him. Even though he had a season as a rookie that is very comparable to this last year, ironically, if you look at the stats. But even though he had a season like that, they were behind him because he was young, he was fresh, he was the guy. You know, we won 7 games, and he showed promise. 2017 rolls around, obviously has a fantastic season. The city is behind this guy. And then the unfortunate part of his career starts. He gets hurt at the end of the year. By all accounts, having an MVP caliber season, as anybody would agree. But, you know, 2017 rolls around, he has that amazing season, disaster strikes, tears his ACL, still has the balls to go out there and throw a touchdown on the next play. Anyway, on a torn ACL. Nobody talks about that, by the way. But, you know, that's the first detour in his career. That's the first time you can go, okay, that was unfortunate for him. But the Eagles go on and win the Super Bowl with Nick Foles. And what happens? Carson Wentz has to show up at training camp the next year, and Nick Foles has a statue out in front of the stadium. But hey, it's still Carson Wentz's team. The Eagles committed to him. So they ship Nick Foles off. No, they don't. He was still there 2018. So anyway, disregard that. But anyway, it's still his team. As soon as he gets back from his injury week 3, they put him in, no hesitation. Nick Foles, you're out. Wentz's team. But at some point in 2018, I don't think it's ever been specified when, but at some point in 2018, he has a spine injury. I think it was a herniated disc, something like that. But the point is that this dude played through it for multiple weeks. And eventually he got to the point where he couldn't do it anymore. And he's the one who pulled himself from the game. It wasn't doctors saying you can't play anymore. Wentz came out and pulled himself and basically said, I am not fit to win games for this team anymore. I'm not putting this team in the best position to win. So Foles came in again and did his thing like Mariano Rivera and closed out the season, and closed out a playoff game, and maybe would have closed out another one if it wasn't for Alshon Jeffrey. Fuck you. But, you know, then everything, of course, because Foles wins a couple games at the end of the year and wins a playoff game, the conversation gets louder. Even though, once again, as I stated, in a 2-year span, this guy has 102 passer rating between 2017 and 2018. Nobody cares about that because the noise is getting louder from the fans and from media about this should be Nick Foles' team. Because even though Carson Wentz hasn't done this, and it doesn't done necessarily anything wrong, there's another guy that's doing everything right, and that's another part of what's so unfortunate about this situation is because Wentz didn't do anything wrong. He got hurt, which is unfortunate for him. But unfortunately, the guy that stepped in stepped up. In a lot of situations, that doesn't happen. In a lot of situations, the guy that steps in, you win 3 games, and everybody goes, okay, it's clear we need this guy. It didn't happen with Wentz. They had an offense that was built in a way that Foles could step in and work. And unfortunately, it made it look bad for number 11. But then 2019 rolls around, and he does the unthinkable in a lot of people's eyes. He plays the entire season. All 16 games. He puts the team on his back with an offense made out of fucking chicken nuggets, basically, and leads them to the playoffs. And then it's that time. It's the moment everybody's been waiting for. It's Carson Wentz in the playoffs. It's time to see what this guy's got. And on the second drive of the game, he takes a cheap shot from Jadeveon Clowney. Concussion protocol. He's out of the game. And people held that against him. and they still do to this day. Oh, well, you know, the only playoff game he ever played in, he got hurt in. You know, a concussion is the only injury in the NFL that you can't play through. Like, they literally will not let you play through it. It's not like, you know, a broken ankle or a broken finger where you can tape it next to the other one and keep moving. It's not for a lack of, you know, grit and toughness. It was, hey, dude, you can't see straight, so we're not going to let you go back out there. And I think he came back afterwards and said that, you know, he played the next few plays after the hit and said that he couldn't see and he was blind for moments at a time and things along those lines. And I mean, you can say what you want about the guy, but when it comes to things like that, this is your fucking brain you're dealing with. Like, you can't mess around with that shit. So, as much as I would have loved for him to have played that game, because I think we would have beat Seattle, unfortunately, it's not the way it worked out. But, you know, he gets over the hump of getting hurt. He gets over the hump of missing games. He plays all 16. And what do the Eagles do the following offseason? They draft Jalen Hurts in the second round. And it's just another thing, just another weight on his shoulder. Like, okay, buddy, you know, we know that you won a lot of games for us. We know that you were healthy all last year. You got over the injury bug. But now we're going to put in another factor. We're going to throw another wrench into the situation just to mix it up. And people wonder why this guy, you know, has been reported to be mentally broken and things along this line. Because from the very beginning of basically 2017, he has not had the support that he needs. It just feels like every time if he does something right, it turns out that it's not viewed that way. We're still going to do what we want to do. And it's just, it doesn't really work out as a mental thing. It's like if you know, had a regular job, say you're a salesperson, and you're doing really well selling, and then something happens and you have to take a leave of absence, and somebody else comes in and sells a shit ton of fucking, I don't know, TVs or something. And then you come back and they say, oh, well, you know, you were our top seller for this long, but now this guy just came in and he's been really hot lately, so we think we might want to go with him. Or we're gonna you know, hire this young kid from this other store and transfer him in. That's kind of the situation that Wentz has been in. Because he's been reliable, he's been there, but the Eagles, as an organization, I don't think have believed in him enough. Until now, suddenly, when they're going to fire head coaches and things for him, this is the kind of support that he needed 3 years ago, and 2 years ago, and this past year. Like, Jalen Hurts should have never even been a question mark. He should never even have been on the draft board for the Eagles. If you want to draft a quarterback for depth, there's a lot of guys out there. But Hurts in the second round, I mean, instantly, that's taking a shot at your starting quarterback. Because as soon as Hurts got drafted, it was flooded on social media about Wentz and Hurts and being a problem. Which is undeservedly. The dude led his team on his back in 2019 to a playoff run. Like, you just don't treat people like that. You don't, you know, he doesn't put a team on his back and be the only member of that team basically that didn't get hurt that year, except for Malcolm Jenkins and Jason Kelsey. Those are basically the three guys that didn't get hurt. And, you know, he displayed all the leadership he needed to. That's another thing that goes around about him, is that he's not a leader. And, you know, he put that entire team on his back and did what he's supposed to do. And then you repay him by drafting somebody in the second round. Like, yes, I 100% understand how he can be mentally broken, because there's no winning when it comes to that. You can do everything you have to do right, and they're still going to draft a quarterback, and this doesn't make any fucking sense. And I see people with the comparison to Aaron Rodgers. Oh, well, you know, when they draft a quarterback behind you, this is how you're supposed to react, not like this. Ha 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 ha. Okay, well, look at the situation at Green Bay and Philadelphia and tell me that they're remotely the same. And you're also talking about a 15th year quarterback against a guy who's in his 5th. You know, like, it's not a comparable thing. It's really not. Because the Packers actually have merit, they have reason to draft a quarterback. They're not drafting Jordan Love while Aaron Rodgers is 31 years old and being like, oh man, this is going to be some competition for you. No, Aaron Rodgers is 37, I think, now. Like, they were drafting him because they're trying to draft the replacement for Aaron Rodgers eventually. And he took it one way, and whether or not he used that as motivation to have this amazing year or not is a different story. But when you're 26 years old, like Wentz was when they drafted Hurts, I mean, you can't think any other way except for the fact that they're drafting this guy to eventually replace me, or they're drafting this guy to be competition with me from day one. But as I said, he's had a rough road ahead of him. He's had a lot of unfortunate things to deal with, and hopefully going forward with this new coach and whatever new weapons they pick up in the offseason, Devontae Smith, thank you, please. Hopefully whatever they do benefits him in whatever way it has to do. Because as a Wentz fan, I don't want to see him go, because I think the world of the talent he has, and I think that he still has so much left to play, and I would hate to see the Eagles give up on him so early in his career, and then him go somewhere else and just become a renewed player. I don't want to see this be a Drew Brees situation where he was very solid in San Diego and went to New Orleans and became an entirely different player. I would hate to see him go somewhere else and become a 5,000-yard quarterback and win MVPs and Super Bowls, because it's going to be one of those things where you knew you had him. He was right there in the palm of your hand, and you let him go. You let him walk out the door. So, I'm hoping that moving on next year, things are better. I hope, if you watch this video, I hope that you heard some of these things, and maybe your opinion on Wentz has changed since then. If you still think that he's trash and that, the Eagles should move on, then that's your opinion and you can hold it. But, I'm hoping that the stats I've dropped and, just the statements and overall sentiments that I've said, hopefully it makes you think differently about him. And if it doesn't, then it doesn't. I mean, I don't care. I mean, at the end of the day, this is the team that I have to root for. If you're a fan of a rival team, then I get it. You probably want me to continue to do horrible. I would understand. But as I said, as a football fan in general, looking at it through that lens, I just like to see young players succeed, and that's what I want to see with him. I want to see him, become the quarterback that he once was again. And I think that he can do that next year, and I would love to see it. But overall, I thank you guys for watching this video. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know below. This is the second video this week. I'm going to start doing 2 a week. I think I mentioned that prior, but I'm going to start doing 2 a week for sure. One topic video such as this one that's going to talk about one player in one sport or one team or one situation. And then there's going to be, kind of like the week in review video that I do every week that's going to be, summing up whatever happens in the playoffs for the NFL, and if anything interesting happens in other sports, I'll mention that too. But basically all these other sports are just now starting, so real quiet time for sports is coming very soon. But yeah, I mean, if you guys liked it, please subscribe. Please tell your friends. Please comment and share it and all that good shit too. I'm working on this slowly. I've tried holding the mic farther away from my face today, so hopefully it doesn't sound so muffled and all that. If it does, let me know, and I'll, hold it out way out here or something next time. But overall, thanks for watching, and I will see you in episode 4. See ya.